Hello and welcome back to the Shakeout Podcast, your destination for the stories, personalities, and need-to-know information from the world of Canadian running. I'm your host, John Gay. Last year at the Paris Olympics, just 7 of the 17 distance runners on Canada's Olympic team. With the Olympic season at home, many of Canada's best and brightest stars made the decision to former runners and a chance to a viable career. And while athletes from the rest of the country have gone elsewhere in their quest for success, one small program was rewriting what it means to succeed as a Canadian athlete on Canadian. The 2021 Games were hosted just one track and field Olympian. Fast forward 2 years to Paris, and the number of Olympians who won the medal skyrocketed to 7. Leading the charge in this renaissance has been the small but mighty endurance training group in Quebec City, under the guidance of Athletics Québec's young provincial team head coach, Félix-Antoine Lapointe. At just 38 years of age, but Félix's relatively short career lacks in length, it has made up for in a wealth of experiences. From grassroots origins to a young up-and-coming local bookmaker, Charles Philibert-Thiboutot, to helming that same athlete's career in national records and dual events, Lapointe has seized on the I am joined by some of the nation's finest, both in coaches and distance runners, Félix-Antoine Lapointe, Charles Philibert-Thiboutot. Great to have you both on the show. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your busy training camp in Flagstaff. How is that camp going so far, Coach?
Yeah, thanks for having us. We're in Flagstaff, most of the athletes since 3 weeks, and we have one more week here, and the camp is going well. This year with Worlds in September, we don't want to peak too early, so we do the thing step by step, but everybody are healthy and just in a good spot for the time of the year.
Fantastic. Charles, how are your lungs and legs adjusting to being back at 7,000 feet?
Oh man, I think it's like camp 14 or 15 for me at altitude, and it's still as hard as the first one, to be honest. Like the easy runs still kind of suck. Flagstaff is particularly dry at this time of the year. It's tough to stay hydrated and everything, but it's just a grind you got to go through to get fitter, right? So no, it's been going well.
Yeah, the camps never get easier, but you just keep getting fitter. And I love that you mentioned camp number 14. You were really one of the first guys when I was starting my professional career that was coming to Flagstaff regularly, and fast forward all those years of going, and following you there was enough that I ended up moving full time. So thanks for blazing the trail. On that topic of 14 camps, I think it just speaks to how long you've been in the sport for, and then by extension, how long you, Felix, have been coaching Charles for, and you've accomplished so much together over a decade and a half now. And I'd love to take some time later in the show to go back and recount a bit of that journey. But first and foremost, an overdue congratulations to both of you on a phenomenal 2024 season. Charles, two-time Olympian added to your long list of accolades. Felix, head endurance coach for Athletics Canada at those Paris Olympic Games. And more impressively than that, 3 of your own personal athletes on the Olympic team, a semi-finalist, 2 first-time Olympic finalists, Thomas Fafard, Jean-Simon Desgagnés. Congratulations to both of you. What was that summer like where everything seemed to just come together so perfectly for your training group?
Yeah, thank you. It was a really great outdoor season for Charles, Jean-Simon, and Thomas. And I think one of the reasons why those 3 were successful is we were planning the Olympic year since a couple of years. As a coach, that was a big goal of my career to help them to qualify, but also to be successful at the Olympic. And the 3 athletes working together just pushed each other, and everybody raised the bar, and they were able to have a good impact on each other. So the team aspect and the fact that it was a big goal for the last couple of years was part of the success.
Yeah, absolutely. That working together towards a shared goal. Charles, you'd already been there in 2016. Tragically, injury kept you from the games in 2021 in Tokyo. So a long time coming for you. Now, I want to touch a little bit on that multi-year plan of getting back to the Olympics, because in 2021, the province of Quebec had just one athlete represented on the Canadian Olympic track and field team. And fast forward 3 years to Paris last summer, that number had jumped all the way up to 7. And of those 7, 3 of them were from your small training group alone, all 3 of whom went on to make it out of the qualifying rounds in Paris. How did that come together? What was the change from 2021, when there was one athlete on the Olympic team from the province, to 3 years later, there's suddenly 7, and not only are they making the team, but they're going on to do phenomenal things?
Yeah, there's a lot of reason, but I'm working for Athletics Québec since 2018. They just opened a new position as a provincial head coach. And one of the goals with this new position was to improve the results at national and international level from the province. So definitively, the provincial sport organization put more emphasis about high performance and how we can help the athlete from the province to be successful at the higher level. And in that role, it was easier for me to be a bit more focused about high performance and helping those athletes to be successful. And part of my role is to coach a group from 15 to 20 athletes based in Quebec City, but part of it is also to manage our strategic plan about high performance in all the province. So trying to build some good environment. Our main hub are Quebec City, Montreal, and Sherbrooke, where most of the elite athletes from the province are based. So how we can help the coach in those environments, raise the bar, having good IST, helping the athlete be a bit more professional. So that's part of the reason why. Of course, we also have some talented athletes in the province, and the environment and the work from the Athletics Quebec don't make all the changes, but it's part of the success. Just the Athletics Quebec put more emphasis about high performance and good athlete achieving good results. That's a good example for all the other athletes that we can do it and we can have success.
Yeah, I think add to that great coaching in you and some of the other Quebec team athletes. Now, Charles, you've been involved with Athletics Quebec for much longer than Felix has been the head coach of Athletics Quebec, and I think it's no secret that when he mentions great athletes for younger athletes to look to, you're probably the prime example of that. What have you noticed in your 15 years at the provincial and national team levels as some of the changes in your home province in terms of support for athletes like yourself?
I think some of it obviously has been like overall support. Obviously, the provincial team coach position and all the support that goes around it helps elevate the athletes. But the main thing for me that's different now from when I started running, it really is the culture. Because when I was in high school, never I ever thought that I could compete at the Olympics. I would compare myself to athletes of my age from like my region or my province. I would never look at national athletes. I didn't even know that going and studying in the NCAA and trying to get like a pro contract was a thing. I just think that culturally we were very secluded, and we had a tendency to really just compare ourselves to ourselves within the province, and we never really looked beyond that. And I think that like naturally, as I got better and I started pushing barriers for myself throughout my career, and I started like winning races on the provincial level and then on the national level, and then I went on to do a few national teams. It's like, well, why do we always compare ourselves to like the people from the past from the province? We should be looking at like when I was starting, I should have been chasing Nate Brennan much earlier, but like that thought wasn't there for me because it was just like BC and Ontario athletes are just stronger. Like that's just what it is. So I just think that culturally now Um, since there are a few of us that have done well at the international level, now the younger kids and the grassroots, they're starting to see that as Quebecers, we can definitely make some moves and have great results at the national and the international level. And I think it's been a big culture change since in the last 15 years.
It's interesting that you talk about the culture in Quebec being so inward focused, and I suppose maybe understandable as this francophone island amidst a sea of anglophone North America. And yet there has been such a noticeable shift. And I mean, I keep coming back to the fact that your group alone had 3 Olympians last year, all of whom did very, very well at the Olympic Games themselves. Do you think that there's a flip side to the culture in Quebec, something unique about it that's working in a positive way, or maybe it's been a change towards something more positive in these last 7, 8 years? Is there anything unique about the culture in Quebec that you think has contributed to now this resurgence of successful Quebecois athletes competing on a global stage?
Well, I think one of the upsides of like looking at ourselves very inwardly, like you said, is that we gain a lot of traction in the media or within fans or within the running community when we start doing well, which like I will forever attribute a lot of my personal success as a runner and the way I've branded myself over the years by how the Rougeard from Université Laval, which is the university program I was in, they were really good at showcasing the local athletes. And, like when you're part of such a big sports program and you're in traditional media every week, whether it is on TV, like the French CBC, or whether it is in the written media, the newspaper and all that stuff, like you reach a broader audience. And then once, even if track itself is not a super popular sport in Quebec, people keep hearing about that track runner that's doing well. And then once the Olympics come around, we have a lot of support. And that's what I felt like myself compared to other athletes on the national team that go into the Olympics. If we talk about someone like Mohamed Ahmed, who is like one of the greatest Canadian runners of all time with like Olympic medals to his name and stuff, and barely has any media recognition in the rest of Canada because he's just like a Canadian athlete amongst others. Whereas when you're in Quebec, people really root for you, and there's this pride really behind Quebec athletes, regardless of the sport. So I do think that in terms of like gaining traction and having support and feeling like you have a lot of support, this is a very cool thing about being part of this province as an athlete.
Yeah, strong sense of shared Quebec identity where the provincial fans want to see you do well relative to not just the world, but to your other, maybe I can even extend this to saying your other Anglophone Canadian competitors.
Yeah.
Felix, from a recruiting point of view, Charles has already touched on Université Laval and the Rouge d'Or, a program that you were the head coach of for many years before narrowing your focus into this high performance provincial team role. From a recruiting perspective, do you think that extra publicity, that extra coverage, the extra support from the general media and from the general population in Quebec made it easier to keep talented athletes from moving away? We see so many of the top Canadian athletes move south to the NCAA system, and yet all 3 of your Olympians last year were homegrown talent that stayed at home in Quebec at Laval for their university competition years. Do you think that the Quebec culture helps from a recruiting perspective in terms of keeping the best athletes from moving away?
Yeah, it's probably help, but it's important for me that you stay home for the good reason. I don't want to push an athlete to stay in a Quebec environment if you think that the best fit for him is outside the province, in another province in Canada or in the US. But definitively, what is important for me is we should provide in Quebec, but also in every province, some good training environment that would help to the best Canadian athlete to be successful at the international level. And depending the event of the athlete or what is driving them, some will stay in Canada, some will go south, and it will, in my mind, always be like that. But I think if we make sure to provide good training environment in Canada, it's going to help short, mid, and long term the Canadian athlete to be successful at the international level.
And when you talk about providing that environment, I think Laval has done a great job, for instance, of creating a comparably competitive training environment for athletes who do have Olympic aspirations. It doesn't feel like a sacrifice necessarily in terms of the level of coaching or the level of training partners for them to stay home. The one thing that I think is probably on the minds of a lot of our listeners as we talk about Quebec and Quebec City in particular as a training environment is the weather. And it's no secret that it's a difficult place to train for much of the year. How have you gone about as a coach making sure that your athletes are able to not only train year round, but train at a high enough level that they're able to compete against the very best in the world? Charles, you're a multiple-time world indoor team member. You've set national indoor records at several distances over the course of your career. Felix, how do you go about keeping athletes at home and not only keeping them there, but keeping them healthy and fit enough to compete through those tough winter months?
Yeah, that's a good question. In my philosophy, I like to see the glass half empty, half full instead of half empty. That's really important, and I don't like to find excuses to not being successful. So there's probably 4 months of the year really tough to train in Quebec City, December to March. So especially with the professional athlete like Charles, Jean-Simon, and Thomas, if it's doable with their schedule, I like to skip at least one of those 4 months in training camp. Last few years, we spent January in Flagstaff. So at this point, if you're able to do it, there's only 3 months during the year. And since a couple of years, we're lucky to have this indoor oversized track at the Speed Skating Center. It's 455 meter in lane 1, and we have 3 lane. So since we have this facility, that's a big game changer, and probably using treadmill a bit more than some other athlete based on their environment. So adapting the yearly training plan, taking advantage if you can skip 1 month with training camp outside the province, using the good facility that we have, and a bit more treadmill, especially when we have a snowstorm and all like that. But it's always doable. You have to adapt the training, and like I said, don't use it as an excuse. There's some athlete from Norway, Sweden, and all those countries that similar weather that what we have in Canada and Quebec City, and it's doable. You just have to manage well your training plan, I think.
I love that perspective. We just recently did an episode on this show about the Norwegian method, and I think you might be onto something there. The Quebec method, we can start calling it. A little bit more treadmill running, but it certainly makes you guys tough and clearly ready to compete with the very best in the world. Now, another thing that, Charles, you've already touched on a little bit, is that prior to your own career, there weren't a lot of people, provincially or otherwise, for you to look up to and aspire to as to what was possible for an athlete from Quebec. We'd had some great success going back to the 80s with Quebec distance runners, but really for your formative years, there weren't any truly world-class athletes, unless I'm missing some names, who were actually based in Quebec. Felix, you look like you want to interject.
Yeah. Probably that from early 2000 to 2015, not a lot of Quebec athletes were really successful in distance running, but we. It's important for me to name Ashraf Tadzili and Émilie Mondor, both from Montreal, and they train most of their high performance career in BC, but they both went to the Olympic, and they both are two of the best distance runner that we had from the province. And it's a good example that during those years, the few of the athletes from the province who were successful at the international level, they just trained outside the province because they didn't have the environment and the example that it's doable to do it in the province. So I still want to recognize those athletes, and especially Ashraf and Emily.
Yeah, Emily training at Simon Fraser, and both still holding several top 5 places in the national record books. That's a great point to bring up. But as you also mentioned, not based in Quebec for much of their professional career. Fast forward all of these years, seeing the success that you've had and then the success that this younger generation has had. What's it like, Charles, knowing that you paved such a strong path for future Olympians like Jean-Simon and Thomas to follow in your footsteps?
Honestly, I think it's I'm in the uh I'm in the sunset of my career. Obviously, I don't got long time left racing on the track, and I gave myself more time to reflect on these things, and I think it's probably one of the things I'm the most proud of because when you like, I think Felix and I grew up together in like the training and this whole process of how do we create a good environment and how do we get the Olympics and World Championships and so on. And um, looking back, like there are a lot of things that I'm thinking with the speed that I had when I was 23 or 24, if I had the aerobic development that I have now, that which we focused a lot on the last few years, I could have probably run like 328 to 329 at the age of 25, 26. And like when you think about these things, like one thing that strikes me is just that like I have no regrets because I think we really did in the moment what we thought was best. And we really stuck with our mentality, which was to push our limits and see like how far we could go. And like even if like on paper, I could have probably done better younger if we did things differently. Um, like you said, it kind of paved the way for younger athletes. And now younger athletes, not only do they have someone to look up to and say, hey, like it's actually possible for me to go to the Olympics because like this guy's done it, but also now like there are a lot more um, like the environment globally is much better with the setup they have provincially and how um, Athletics Quebec is investing in high performance. Obviously, Felix now is a very, um, uh, oh, why am I having a blank?
He's a
Um,
very accomplished coach, is one thing I will say.
yeah, I didn't mean like, of course, accomplished, but also he's very knowledgeable now. And I think that um, it's one thing to do errors. It happens to everyone, but we learn from those. And now, at the age of 37 or 38, he has the knowledge in middle distance running and distance running that a lot of like coaches in the 50s and 60s have because he's experienced so much and he's learned from every um, every good program he's done or every program that he felt like things could be changed and whatnot. So I think there's a lot of pride to be have in knowing that we really did everything to try to push the boundaries, push our limits, and from that we gained knowledge that really set us up in a way that future generations can be successful, both in terms of finding motivation and finding inspiration and trying to qualify for major games, but also in terms of having the knowledge to actually get there, which is big for me.
Yeah, I think you and you say that you're in the twilight years of your career, but you're running some of the best running of your life. I think it's important that we note that. But uh, nonetheless, you will certainly leave behind you a legacy of success and reframing what was possible for Quebec-based athletes to achieve. I love that you mentioned that you both grew up in the sport together. For the listeners who don't know the origins of your story, Felix, maybe take us back to your start as a coach because it happened very close to the same time that Charles was just starting to come onto the scene as an athlete.
Yeah. My first year as a full-time coach was 2010. I was assistant coach at Laval University in charge of distance and cross-country program. And it was a rookie year for Charles at Laval. So we start working together in 2010. And back in the days, Laval University was not really competitive at even conference and national level at CIs, now U Sports. And the main way we just tried to push the limit was, okay, we're going to work harder. And it was probably good enough to quickly improve the team as one of the top U sports in distance and cross country. But a couple of years later, I would say my mindset, I just changed work harder to work harder and smarter. So um, I was, I hope, smart enough to learn from the mistake that at some point we probably push a bit too hard, and how you can reflect on that, learn from what you did, and making sure that you can find a good balance of working hard, but also put some emphasis about recovery and making sure the athletes stay healthy. So yeah, 2010 was my first year as assistant coach, and quickly I was at a good spot at the good timing to be head coach of the track and cross country program, only at 23 years old, in 2011. So from 2011 to 2018, I was track and cross country head coach. Then in 2018, I got the position at Athletics Québec. I was able to keep the leadership of the cross country program, still working at Athletics Québec until last year, 2024. And after the Olympic year last year, I just decided to only focus on my role at the provincial level and working with the high performance athlete base in Quebec City. The fact that we were able to have some good results quickly at university level, like 2012 was our first medal in cross country as a team in London. I will always remember that. Charles was one of the leader of the team, and a couple of years later in 2016 we won for the first time a cross country championship, and we got 5 titles during the time I was there. So that was some really great experience, about performance, but also about the team spirit and the culture that we build. And I think that the mindset we had was, we don't want any limit. We want to push ourselves to be the best version that we can. And at this point of my career, the goal was mainly university level, then having some athlete making national team. And I was able to switch this mindset with the pro athlete like Charles, Jean-Simon, and Thomas about we want to be competitive with the best in the world, and we don't want to have any limits. So it's just a different setup, but the same mindset at the next level.
Yeah, applying what you learned in a very short amount of time with the ushered to the professional group that you're now helming. How, and this question I'm going to open up to both of you, how have you seen your style of coaching and of training, Charles, change? You talk about working smarter and harder, so that hard work piece is still vital. Anybody who follows your training program closely knows that you're not strangers to hard work. But when you talk about working smarter, what does that look like for both of you?
I think, and Felix may correct me on that, but I think in the early 2010s, the I want to say that the major influence on Quebec coaches in terms of training style probably came from France and from like a European style of coaching that was centered mostly around very like a lot of high intensity. And like Felix said, working really hard, it works for a while. And I got really good doing, like very intense specific sessions 3 times a week from 2010 to 2017. But then after that, from 2017 to 2020, I got chronically injured in multiple places. And it's one of those things where, as an athlete with my coach, Felix, and also some people in my support team, and I have in mind Mary Lou Lamy, my physiotherapist, like getting injured so much, we kind of had to sit down and be like, is this the right way to go? How can we modify training so I can actually become healthy, but also get stronger and keep running PBs, right? And I think this really hard period in my career, going from 2017 to 2020, where I couldn't put together more than 3 months of training, right? Like it was very hard on the morale, physically, like being hurt all the time was also very hard. And I think throughout this period, we had to question ourselves a lot in how I can keep improving. And once I got healthy, how I could get better. And, instead of going elsewhere and looking for another coach, I just worked closely with Felix to see how we could manage a program that could fit my needs, which I had physical limitations at the time because of the injuries. So, and I think from that perspective, we switched from a very high intensity and anaerobic heavy program to a lot like going to, I think, a model that's a lot more common, I want to say, in the rest of Canada and the US. So like lots of volume, like easy intensity, like tempos, and really making sure I was controlled in tempos. If I ever did a tempo between 2010 and 2015, it was a time trial for me. Like I wasn't, yeah, yeah, I was never holding back, So like training more smart, making sure you're in the right zones. And then on the days that you're supposed to go hard and do a specific session, you go really hard. And these come in a calendar probably once every 10 to 20 days. But, when it's there, we're like, okay, we're going to make sure that the whole week is crafted so that on that day we can really like dig ourselves deep and get the most out of the body for where it's at right now. So I think that's how it evolved. And looking back at it, like I haven't put much thought into this, but this period where I was really injured and I was struggling, I think I'm thankful that I was just able to stay with Felix and collaborate with him. And I think we both grew together in that period, because we both challenged ourselves. How can we make training work? How can we get the most out of an athlete that is physically limited? And how do we apply that to on a broader level to like the training program? And I think after the Olympics in 2016, when things started to get pretty hard, that's where there was a shift in training, and we had to go from training hard solely to training smart and hard.
Yeah. When you talk about that difficult period, it was several years long where you just couldn't seem to get healthy for long enough to string together the same level of success that we knew that you were capable of and that you'd already proven yourself to be capable of. And you've touched on this a little bit already, but during that time, it was still a period when your future Olympic level training partners, Jean-Simon and Thomas, were not yet anywhere near your level. Were there ever doubts about staying in Quebec? Was it a difficult decision to stay home when you saw really all around you the model for professional success was go somewhere to college and then move away, find a pro group, and train with other pros? Did that ever cross your mind? Was that a conversation the two of you ever had to have, or a difficult decision that you ever had to make?
Again, not really, because I just think that culturally, like I never really thought that my place was going to be outside of Quebec and Canada, to be honest. Like I spent a lot of time training and doing rehab in BC, obviously. Like I love the city of Vancouver, but I was never really big into like joining a group. And I think that one thing that I liked about, like, it was comforting for me when things got hard that I was able to have an open conversation with Felix and we could challenge ourselves and see how we could make things better. Whereas I do think that if I were to be in a professional group, if as long as you're healthy, that's great, because you just jump in the train. You have a lot of great guys to train with, and obviously that's very uplifting. But at the same time, if you're injured and then suddenly what you're physically capable or not capable to do doesn't really fit the mold, then things get really difficult. And I don't think you could get nearly as much the amount of support you could get in a group like that if you're injured than I got on my own, really putting faith into my support team, which was mainly Félix-Antoine and my physiotherapist. So I don't think it ever crossed my mind, to be honest.
And I think part of our success I always have been open that, for example, especially during winter or when he was injured and need to work with Mary Lou in Vancouver, I always support Charles that, okay, if you need to spend a couple of weeks in Vancouver, I'm agree with that, and we're going to make sure to connect with local runner in BC and other coaches to have the opportunity to train with them. So I think if my mindset would have been close to you have to stay 12 months per year in Quebec City, maybe Charles would have come with the idea of going somewhere else. But I think I always try to be open-minded, and what's the best for Charles, we're going to try to make it work.
That mindset is one that I have to personally thank you for, Felix, because it was your openness and flexibility with Charles that allowed me to avail myself of him as a training partner for several weeks at a time when he would make those trips out to Vancouver and get treatment from Mary Lou Lamy in North Vancouver and join my own training group for sessions. So I'm personally appreciative of having had the opportunity to work so frequently with him. Felix, during that period of time, was there already a hope in your mind of having a professional group one day? Did you already recognize that there was talent coming through the system? Because again, when you started out coaching, you really had to rise to whatever level Charles was rising to. When he was a good provincial level athlete, you were a good provincial level coach. When he was a good university level athlete, you were a good university level coach, and so on and so on. Do you remember a time when your aspirations maybe grew and it became the new goal that, okay, I want to be able to be coaching at the Olympic level, not just one athlete, but multiple athletes, and to create a program that has that as the focus every year?
Yeah, it's probably somewhere between 2018 and 2020. Charles made his first global team in 2015 at Worlds, then Olympic 2016. And at that point, my main focus was with the university team, but seeing the kind of results that Charles was able to get and seeing the younger generation of talented athletes that I was able to work with, probably around 2018 to 2020, it was the first time I was kind of dreaming about, okay, maybe in the next few years we can have a couple of athletes similar level that what Charles is reaching, and it's not going to be one Olympic athlete that I'm used to work with during my career. And definitively having some younger athletes having success at national level that give me the confidence that we can do it. And now that's a good trio with the Charles, Thomas, and Jean Simon. And hopefully in next few years, I'm going to work with other athletes from the province that's going to reach that level.
Yeah, it certainly seems like the momentum is only going in a positive direction right now. Back to that topic of growing as a coach, what have you done, Felix, throughout your career to continue honing your skills as you've continued to create more and more successful athletes and they find their new limits? How have you been able to push your limits as a coach? We've talked a little bit about adjusting those intensities. Are there anything else that you feel you've done really well to continue to grow alongside your athletes?
Yeah. In my philosophy, training and coaching is a bit of a mix between science and art. And as a coach, if you want to be successful, you need to have those basic knowledge about science, and having also a really good knowledge of what are the best practice. Let's say what the best 1500 5K steepler are doing in the world, and how I can take that and put in my environment, in our reality, not only copy what the other are doing, but understanding what why the best of the world are doing it and how I can use it in my training environment. So yeah, knowing the best practice, having some good skill set about science, being willing to try different things. And it's possible that you make some mistake, but learn from that and be a better coach in the next season, in the next year. I think that's part of my philosophy. So if you don't want to make mistake, you're going to do some basic stuff and you probably have decent results. But if you want to push your limit, you have to be willing to take some risk, but some calculate risk and learn from that and try to be a better coach every year, every season. And when I look at the program I was doing in 2010, it's really different than what I'm doing now in 2025. And I hope in a couple of years, my program will still improve and be better and a bit different than what I'm doing now.
Charles, from your perspective, has it ever felt like those calculated risks have come at your expense? Do you ever feel like you've been the guinea pig, being that oldest athlete, the most accomplished athlete? I've heard some legends of some pretty crazy Laval team workouts back in your day when you were still running in university. Has it ever felt like you've been the experimental crash test dummy for Felix?
I mean, you don't feel it in the moment. It's just when you reflect about these like crazy workouts a couple of years later that you're like, oh yeah, like that was pretty nuts, you know? And it's funny you say this. I'm in the house right now with Jean-Simon Thomas, and Kieran Lum is here. And I gave Kieran a glimpse of my training log in the weeks leading up to the 2016 Olympics. And like the workouts back then that I was doing on the track were like absolutely crazy. And which is like to be expected when you're only a few weeks out from the Olympics, right? But um, yeah, I just think that like I said earlier, I don't think we have anything to regret about that because we gave our best and we did everything we thought in the moment was best for us. And what's important about um, the fact that maybe myself and part of the group of like the older generation of Laval runners were guinea pigs, like um it wasn't for nothing because now Felix is extremely knowledgeable and he knows what to do and what not to do. And I think it's a good thing that as a coach he was able to grow through that and question himself. And like he said, I really admire that about him. The program in 2010 is very different from the program right now in 2025, and the program in 5 and 10 years is likely to be different. And actualizing yourself like that, I think, is a very important aspect of being successful in any part of life, really. Whether like you're an athlete, you're a coach, or is it for your job. So I do admire that about Felix, and I think being the guinea pig back in the day, it was fun. I didn't know better. I just like went the track 3 times a week and sent it. So it was
Ran
fun
your
for me.
brains out every time.
Yeah.
And that sacrifice is one that is now paying dividends because you have been given phenomenal training partners that maybe didn't have to go through the same crazy hardships that you had to go through learning the ropes, but it's made great athletes for you to train with now. Charles, could you have ever foreseen 10 years ago that you would still be in the sport and be surrounded by teammates who are now also Olympians, also Quebec national or Quebec record holders and national champions? Did you ever even dare to dream of that when you were starting out your own professional career? Or has this all just been more than you could ask for?
Yeah, I want to say that like I knew my career was probably going to be this long because when I competed in Rio in 2016, I was 25, and I thought to myself that it was it was like in terms of like long-term athlete development, it would be very possible for me to shoot for being a 3-time Olympian, being 2016, 2020, and 2024. So to me, competing over that period was a given for me, and I don't think I was never really gonna shy away from that. Um, One thing that's interesting about your question is that I feel like I've been a late bloomer in the sport, and quite a few times in the province, we've seen some unreal raw talent, like kids that are good from the ages of like 16 to 19. And like on paper, like distance for distance, age for age, they do a lot better than I did back then. And we were like, whenever one of these came up, I always had hopes that they would join the group one day, and that like we could actually have a high performance thing going on. And I think more than often it didn't pan out. So for a while, I was ready to just like pave my own way, and I was ready to just do my own thing and shoot for those 2 other Olympic berths by myself. But um, like luckily enough, Thomas and Jean-Simon very early on were clear talents. I mean, I think both of them were running low 14s for 5K at the age of like 17. At 17, I was running like 16 minutes for 5K. I wasn't really there. And Jean-Simon going like he went to the same high school that I went to, and like I know what his like environment is like, and I had a lot of hopes in him. I knew that like not only he was talented, but it was someone with like a head on his shoulders, which is basically what you need, to make it to the world class level. You need to be physically talented, but also having a head on your shoulders to be able to sustain all the training and like strive in very difficult conditions when you're training really hard and running. And then Thomas was also, I think showcasing a lot of talent and a will to really make it to that level. And once in 2022 and 2023, when both of them were really starting to make it, like knocking the door of the international level of running, I think that's when both Felix and I got excited about like, there are chances that 2024 could be our year. Like that we could have like a group. And, I think leading up all the way to 2024, the guys would try to stick with me in really hard, like specific sessions. And sometimes it would blow up in their faces. And they always think that like they were ready to like duke it out with me in workouts. And, like they were just missing a little thing. And then every year from like 2020 to 2024, they progressed. And finally in 2024, once we were in flag for our yearly spring camp, I told Felix, I think the guys are ready now. We're all going to be working out together. Like this is the time, and felt really exciting, to be honest.
I remember a specific run I went on with you. I think you and Thomas Fafard had just done, I want to say it was 4 by 1K 200 or 1K 400. And you turned to me on a run and you said, I think if Tom and I were to race a 5K next week, he would have a 50-50 chance of beating me. And at this point, you were a 13:12 or 13:13 5,000 runner. Thomas was still in the 13:30s. And I kind of rolled my eyes and thought, yeah, that's a nice compliment for you to pay, but I'll believe it when I see it. And Thomas ended up jumping on a plane, going over to Europe, and within a month, he was a 13:05 guy. He punched his ticket to the Olympics. Fast forward another couple months, he's an Olympic finalist. And I just think that's such a cool progression for so many years. And I don't want to date you here, Charles. For so many years, those guys were looking up to you and probably got dragged up in the sport by having someone with 8 years more experience to aspire to. Do you think that it's now at a point where they're helping you stay in the sport longer than maybe you would have chosen to otherwise because everyone's running so well and they're finally able to maybe take some of the load off of you having to be the guy every single workout? Do you feel like you finally earned the right to sit back and let them take the hard reps and workouts?
Yeah, I think I've let myself do that. Like starting last year, I was like comfortable with them really sharing the load. And also I think like it's keeping me in the sport in the sense that the camaraderie we had going to Diamond Leagues together and doing training camps leading up the Olympics, and then being in the Olympics, all three of us. That's the type of camaraderie that I hadn't experienced since my college days at Laval. And it just felt so refreshing, like at the age of 33, like last summer, like most guys have retired by then. And like, it's like at this point, you don't have infinite motivation because you've been training really hard and like striving for greatness and striving for big goals for all these years. And you don't have that infinite motivation that you have at the age of 22 to 28 to like, if you have to train by yourself, like, screw it, I'm going to do it, like every bit of new motivation I could get, I'll take it. And having the guys not only share the training load, but also be there and really create like a cool, super fun team atmosphere, really gave like a second life to my career. And, this year, I think like this is going to be my last year on the circuit. And one of the things I've told myself early in the year was that, like what I had with the two guys in 2024 was really special. And if I can get one more year of that, regardless of like my results on the track, I think it would be a great way to end the career. So they have definitely been a source of motivation for me to stay in the sport at this point.
You guys now, between the three of you, own every Quebec national record, I think from the 1,000, maybe even, certainly the 1,500, all the way up to the half marathon. I've touched on it before, 3 Olympians last year. You're doing the circuit. You're all representing Canada and every major national team on the Diamond League circuit as well. It must feel like you finally made it as a group. And Felix, for you, with all the success that you've now enjoyed in just the last couple of years alone, how do you continue to push the envelope? What does continued success look like looking forward?
Yeah. For me, every time you're having some success, whatever the level, it's kind of a motivation to go at the next level. So I hope as a coach in my role at Athletics Québec, I'm going to be able to help the province to qualify more athletes for the next World Championship and Olympic game, and maybe having some athletes from my group at some point of their career making a top 8 or having a medal at the Olympic Games. So I think there's always some motivation to target the more challenging goal. And it's kind of my personality to not only be satisfied with what we did, but trying to find a way to go at the next level. And that's something that really drives me. I have to admit that for a few weeks after the Olympic, I probably had the Olympic blues for a few weeks because we were targeting that since a couple of years, and now that it's done. So okay, what's next? But after a few weeks, I was happy to be back on the track and helping those athletes to plan the next season and World Championship this year in Tokyo, and having some plan for the group for the next few years. So I definitely have this kind of motivation to help the athlete to go at the next level and helping Charge to have a great last year of his competitive career.
And you've had such a wonderful career that I think whatever you can accomplish, Charles, in these next months that we still have you on the circuit is really the cherry on top. And between the two of you, you've co-authored a model for Canadian homegrown success, that the best athletes don't have to leave the country in order to compete with the very best athletes in the world. What's a piece of advice that you could give to other Canadian coaches, other Canadian groups, in terms of not only keeping the best talent at home, but developing that in such a sustainable way? Do you think it's possible for other programs in the country to maybe one day give you guys some competition as another Canadian-based professional group?
Yeah, of course. I think the first step is to have a coach working full-time with elite athlete. That's doable to do at the same time collegiate and 1 or 2 pro athletes, but having a vision of building a large group and being able to travel with them, that it's really tough long term to do both. That's something that I learned over the last few years. But I think if we are able to create in Canada environment with full-time professional coach and IST helping them and having a team around the coach and the athletes, definitely it's possible to have several Canadian environment with Olympian athlete having success at the higher level. It's really doable. You just have to put in place what it takes and having some environment that will attract the athlete to stay home. And like I said earlier, I think Canadian athlete training in Canada will have success if they're enjoying their day-to-day training and if they are training at home for the good reason. And it's not bad to have athlete training in US, but for some athlete, the good fit will be to stay home. And for some other athlete, it will be to discover something new in the US.
To both of you, by the time this episode airs, you'll have made your way from training camp in Flagstaff to competition. Charles, you're competing on the roads at the National 10K Road Championships before diving into track in Europe. Felix, you'll be in Los Angeles with the other 2 parts of the trio of pros you have in your stable right now, Jean-Simon and Thomas, at the Sound Running track meet. Best of luck to both parties, both in Ottawa and in LA. And best of luck to both of you with this year ahead. It has been so cool to follow along, to watch the ascent of Athletics Québec, and